Hi, my name's Scott Naismith. I'm a landscape painter and I have a product review for the Pengo Creative brush stylus. So let's just get into this box. Tell you a little bit about the brush stylus from Pengo Creative. You can see it is a stylus which has an interchangeable nib for the normal stylus side, and one of them is a large nib and one of them is a small nib. Now I've had this stylus for a few weeks and I've been working with it, and I'm starting to get used to it, but my first impressions were, why have two different sizes of nib? You can't really, you only have one connection point and with the screen, and the only benefit would be the feel of using a bigger stylus when you're using a bigger brush, but anyway, we'll come to that. So I'm going to put the larger stylus piece down for the moment, and we're going to concentrate on the smaller stylus and the brush stylus here. So you can see the brush stylus is, it comes to a kind of point. Brush length, the length of these bristles possibly aren't maybe long enough, but I'll come to that in a second. If you're used to using one of these, this product review will help you, because I am a regular oil painter who paints with a stylus on an iPad for sketching and planning works. So let's just get it into action, and we'll start with the brush itself, and I'm going to work on Procreate with this demo. Incidentally, the bristles, they aren't pressure sensitive. This is just a different way of applying a stylus to a screen. It's not acting any differently should you work harder or softer with the pressure. But a little note on that pressure sensitivity. When you're working with a brush, often the biggest, boldest brush mark can be made with a very, very soft touch, depending on how the paint slides off the bristles. So actually pressure sensitive, I don't think, is a real big important thing for a stylus. It's very difficult to get pressure sensitivity that doesn't just annoy you. So let's have a go and see how that works. I'm going to show you using Procreate. So I'm just going into Procreate here, and I am going to open a new file, and we'll go to our Retina display. So you can control things with the brush itself, and I'm going to put the brush size right up and the opacity right up, and I'll show you how this works. Now this is just working with the wet round brush, and the feel of it on the screen just feels like you've got much less resistance using this brush. Now I've been using it for a few weeks and I've got used to the amount of pressure that you need to apply. The great thing about a brush stylus, really for me, is that you don't apply, there really isn't any resistance on the screen. With one of these rubber styluses, that you do get more resistance on the screen, which means that you need to kind of, you don't get that freeness of mark and the feeling that you glide across the screen. And the other thing is, if I just make a darker mark here, is really the consideration of how much pressure you put on those bristles. Generally when you're painting with a brush, you don't really want to use anything other than the top third of the brush. So your strength that you apply to the brush really is quite light, and that's great for just gliding across and making gestural marks. But how does the brush work? Well, when you just touch the screen, nothing happens. Nothing happens until the bristles are turned about that. So generally there is a little bit too much pressure that you have to apply to the brush for it to begin to work. Which is a downside, but I think that's just a symptom of a brush stylus and the fact that you do need to apply slightly more pressure than a brush itself. So that was a bit of a disappointment when first using a brush stylus, but it's just a case of getting used to that pressure. So what I'll do is I'll just sketch out a face area, just using the dark areas that you might use. So just going on to brush stylus here, dark areas for the eyes, down in size a little bit, area for the mouth here and nose. Now you'll notice that when I'm holding this stylus, a lot of the time when I'm setting out these first areas of where I'm putting down paint onto the screen, I'm actually holding the stylus like you should use a brush, certainly at the start of a painting anyway. When you have the stylus, you can actually use it like that, and actually the pressure that you apply onto the screen using the stylus like this is almost less. You just need to make sure you're not scuffing the screen with the metal bit of the stylus here. But actually, because of the reduced pressure that you need when it's at an angle like that, you're less likely to anyway. I'm told that these screens are made of tough stuff, and regardless of whether that touches the screen, it won't actually scratch it. I'll believe that when I see my screen at the end of a couple of years of sketching. Okay, so I would build up the colours like this, and really for a brush stylus I would only be using it for the freer parts of the painting. I mean, say there's a detail to be done in the eyes and you're zooming in, you can just use the other side of the stylus and start to reduce your brush size and start to do those details when you can see better where you're going with them. With the brush stylus you could get in, but you would have to zoom in a little bit closer with the brush stylus to get a good idea of where you are with it. But because you've got a normal stylus this size and a brush stylus that side, it's kind of easy to do that. So you always want the regular stylus there. And this is the stylus side, so I'm going to use this stylus to do a drawing as if you were doing a drawing before this little sketch started. So I'll go into the layers, I'll add a new layer on top and choose the 6B pencil. I'll also dim the other layer and take it to maybe opacity 76. Okay, so back to this layer. Now, I'm going to be sketching using the stylus, and it is the first impressions of the stylus as soon as you move from brush to stylus is the resistance on the screen, because it's rubber, but you can't really avoid that with the stylus. But regularly you're using the stylus like a pencil and doing details. So it's not such a problem. But what I like to do when I'm sketching is hold the brush like the stylus like this. So you might be just sketching where the eyes come, where the nose comes into line, where the mouth is, and you've got this freer use of a pencil. And this is possible through the angle at which you can use the stylus, which is really good. Because of the shape of it, you can kind of hold it really at an angle to the screen. And just when I'm using this, I'm kind of thinking it's really nice stylus. It's nice and firm, but yet gives you the right amount of resistance. So the stylus, I think, has got something inside it to stop the rubber going in too much, which is good, and it just feels like a good quality stylus to work with. Now what I'm going to do now is just change over to the larger one, and I do think that they need a solution as to what to do with the other attachment when you're using the larger one. So I'll just put the larger one on and see what I get from that. Well, sketching wise, it feels like a piece of charcoal. Because it's larger, you get the, I mean, using an iPad and using a screen, it's all about feel, you know. It's all about how something feels to you. Is it sort of, does it feel like you're drawing? And yeah, although at first I was skeptical about why you would want a larger stylus, it just feels like a bit of charcoal, and using it on its edge, I mean, it's all about, oh, gotta be careful you're not touching the screen twice. It's all about how something feels, and this feels really good to sketch with this larger one. And because I'm using it on its side, I can kind of see where the connection point is going to be better. It's a bit like using a thick piece of charcoal. You would use it at an angle to see the connection point of it to the paper. So which is best to sketch with, the larger one or the smaller one? Well, I think that kind of mark, it feels nice with the larger one. And then the smaller one, I think the smaller one is better for detail, and the larger one better. Yeah, the beauty of this bigger one is the resistance between you and the screen. So yeah, there is a real purpose between these two attachments. The larger one gives you less resistance in the screen, which means the initial sketching work can go on without getting it sort of sticking on the screen, without the rubber sticking. And I think that's all down to the shape of the dome of this thing. Now you might ask yourself, well, why wouldn't you just sketch with the brush? And the issue with when the brush starts and stops means that you can't get as accurate a feel for where the mark is going to be made. So the brush is actually only suitable for marks, although that feels quite nice. The brush really is only suitable for marks that are bigger than, say, that are made with a paintbrush and are fairly broad brush marks. So now that I've got the brush on, we can go into the painting, back to the brush. wet round, done. We take it down in size, and I would be using the paintbrush for marks at least that big, or indeed when you zoom into it, because the accuracy of where the brush mark is going isn't there so much. The brush is great for free brush marks, but it's not so great for doing your initial drawing and also your details at the end. I know that Pengo Creative as well, they've got ideas of other attachments that could be added to this. I could possibly recommend that a slightly longer bristle could be good for one of these things. So to sum it up, it's really a good stylus. I think it's up at like $26, which translates into about 17-18 British pounds. Which is competitive with most stylus out there. I think you can get a bamboo one with just the stylus on it. I would reckon this is as good as that. It's a really good stylus. Chopping and changing the nibs is going to be a bit of a hassle, but if you can get some way of keeping the separate nib safe while you use the other one, then you're going to benefit from changing it. The other thing that you can do is, if you don't need the brush stylus, take the brush off, and then you've got the two different sizes of stylus here. So if you're just going sketching rather than paint sketching on your iPad, the two different sizes of stylus on one stylus is good. But I will always be keeping the brush on one end and the smaller on the other, and then I can change to this one if I want to get a quick sketch down. If I'm going to be quick sketching and just getting a charcoal drawing, some kind of drawing down very quickly, I'm going to want to use the bigger one so that I've got a freer use of line on the screen. All in all, it pretty much covers everything, so it's nice to have everything in one, because in all honesty you're only going to be bringing around one stylus with you. Cons with this, I would say the only comment I would say is that the brush, when you're applying it to the screen, ideally you would want the brush to be a lighter touch. I don't think there's any brushes out there that are going to give you that really light touch. It seems that there is a minimum amount of pressure that you need on the screen, which is just a little more than I would want. But get used to that, and I certainly got used to that in the last 2 or 3 weeks of working with this stylus. Thanks for watching the review. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and indeed subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, here is a picture of the guy from Game of Thrones, which I did using this brush stylus.